Hello and a very welcome to each and every one of you. My name is Frans Redlinghuis. I'm the marketing manager at Senves, and we want to welcome you on this cold morning in the Cape. And I think we have a very hot topic this morning. The topic is obviously electricity, and also I think the city of Cape Town, Cape Province, what the Cape is doing to find solutions to the crisis that we are facing. We want to welcome each and every one of you. Thank you for joining us. I just want to quickly, briefly tell you more about Nation in Conversation. Nation in Conversation has been, for the past 12 years, has been a debate and honest discussion sessions where we can derive some content for the agricultural sector and have honest discussions what's happening in the agricultural sector and what are the topics that actually affects our producers. And I think this topic today is also very relevant to that. I would please ask you if you could just switch your phones to silent or off so that we don't disturb the discussion. And after the discussion, we will have some time for questions you can ask your questions to the panelists. Hope you enjoy it, and we hope to see you as well for the 2 o'clock session this afternoon.
Another warm welcome from myself. I'm Annelie Hatting. I'll be facilitating today's panel. Thanks as well to everyone joining us online. It is a cold day, but it is definitely a hot topic. Thank you as well to Minister for Agriculture from the Western Cape, Minister Ivan Meyer, for joining us in the discussion. Hopefully we can get some input from your side as well. I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. On my left, a man who obviously needs no introduction, Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis spends a lot of his time talking to us on the news, fighting difficult battles, and we're hoping to get some insights from him today on the kind of progress and the solutions that they've been implementing here in the Western Cape, and particularly in the city of Cape Town. On his left is Dr. Candace Kluter from the Bureau for Food and Agricultural Policy, BFAB. She works specifically with research into farm and resource analytics, the impact of load shedding on producers here in the Western Cape. And I'm sure from a policy perspective and the analytics and the statistics, we're going to get some great information from her. On the end there, we have a producer in our midst. Thank you very much. Gary Forster joins us from the Eastern Cape, from the Elliot region, where he farms with seed potatoes, maize, and beef. Travelled very far to join us. We do appreciate your participation in today's discussion. Unfortunately, we have an apology from Argon Puren from Green Cape. He couldn't make the discussion today. We hope everything is all right on his side, but I'm sure we'll steam ahead regardless. Just as an intro to today's discussion, so generally in the mornings, I flip open my phone, as most of us do these days, and read a couple of headlines. And the thing that struck me most, not only because it was top of my digital news feed, but because of today's discussion, was that currently 45% of Eskom's installed generating capacity is offline. And I think anyone who's visiting Nampo today or staying over in the area will have felt the impact of stage 6 and what's possibly even been pushed to stage 7 without notifying us in the number of hours a day that we sit without electricity, and the impact on not only producers, ordinary South Africans, but on an event like Nampo as well. Luckily, there's been a lot of sort of energetic participation and proactive solutions from South Africans everywhere. So everywhere you go, you see people marking a plan. And I think that's the kind of thing we want to talk about today. How are we making plans to try and not circumvent the system, but to work with what we have and find ways to get where we want to go? I'd like to start off with you, Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis, not only because you're here on my left. So yesterday, Premier Alan Winde took part in the first discussion on primarily the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the impact on exports from South African producers. And one thing that he said sort of struck me. He said, we want to make one Western Cape town load shedding free by the end of the year. And that's a great test case. And I'm sure whoever gets the lucky draw to be that one town is going to be absolutely thrilled. But the impact long term is still going to be many years down the line for our producers because they don't sit in those towns. In terms of food security and making progress, let's start with the progress that you've made in the city of Cape Town and just running us through some of those very critical solutions that are already in place.
Thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen and guests. The city is pushing extremely hard to be the first load-shedding free city in South Africa. We have a tight competition with several Western Cape towns. I have a very tight competition with my neighbor, the mayor of Stellenbosch, who's racing to do this. I always tongue-in-cheek, lovingly mock her and say, in a town like Stellenbosch, you just need one solar panel on your garage roof. Cape Town's a bit bigger than that. We use 2,200 megawatts at peak hours. So it is a big energy consumer. It's going to take a lot. Since February last year, we have been running flat out to try and get new power onto our city grid. 700 megawatts of power we've already procured. You have to go through what's called financial closure, contracting, and then getting to actual construction and connection to the city grid. So that's going to take some time, but we will get there. I know we will get there. We are absolutely obsessed with it because it is the number one thing killing the South African economy. 2 weeks ago, we got the GDP figures where we saw the GDP still growing at 0.6% quarter on quarter. And, I just put out a tweet to say, it's actually a miraculous result, if you think about it. And it's testament to our farmers, our producers, our entrepreneurs, our business owners in South Africa, that they have managed to squeeze out a little bit of growth, even in the face of the worst year of load shedding ever in 15 years, and so many other hurdles that they have to overcome in our economy. So I think it's despite everything that the government has tried to do, not because of it. And what we are trying to do in Cape Town is just to remove some of those hurdles, load shedding being the most important one. We don't have an enormous farming community in the city. We do have a farming community, but not an enormous one. But we are just so grateful for every business of every sort that is trying to make a go of it in incredibly difficult times. And our mission is to, as quickly as possible, get new power onto the grid. There's just one other thing that I want to talk about. We are the first city in the country to actually pay people for the power that they send back into the grid. And here the farming community has a special role to play because there are lots of farmers out there who have already made solar investments, significant solar investments, and have got excess capacity to sell. And every single small town in South Africa should be buying that excess power from our farming community when they don't need it. And in fact, every town in the Western Cape should be doing that as well. So we are not just giving people a credit. There's lots of places giving people a credit on their bill. But if you run up an excess and we actually owe you money, we will send you that money on a monthly basis. And we've got 900 businesses in the city that are receiving money every month for that power. And we want to make that as easy as possible so that many more can be added to that number of 900. So I think there's a special role to play for the farming community there as well.
Yeah. In terms of wheeling, I think later on in the conversation we're going to get very definitely to transmission because I know that's a critical issue in many parts of the country where, while that seems a great theory and a great dream to have, accessibility of that transmission back into the grid and to other users is hugely problematic. Gary, I want to come to you next and just talk briefly about the solutions that you've implemented, because since 2017, you've been heavily investing in alternative energy, solar among them, to try and not only bring down your costs, but also your reliance on Eskom. So take us through what you've done and just briefly the kind of return that you've seen or the kind of efficiencies that's unlocked.
Okay, so my potato pack shed probably runs for about 5-6 months of the year, and it uses a lot of electricity, so it became quite a big factor. So I put a whole lot of solar panels on the roof with a grid-tied inverter to just reduce my energy consumption. And then I said, as soon as Eskom allows me to feed back into the grid for credits, then I'm prepared to double and triple my investment. So I moved it up from 27 kilowatts to 100 kilowatts. So because they changed the rules of the game and allowed me to do it. So I've been feeding back since January, and the hurdles to get through to be able to feed back into the grid with Eskom is actually quite onerous. So to give you an example, if you've got a small enough Eskom point, then they have those old meters with a little wheel that goes round, okay? And then you take the reading of every month, and you give it to Eskom, they bill you for that. So it's a flat rate. It's probably R1.40 per kilowatt hour, somewhere around there.
Yes.
For you to be able to feed back into the grid, they won't allow you to feed back into the grid on that system because the wheel turns backwards. So in other words, you're actually earning R1.40 per kilowatt hour if you do that. And Eskom doesn't like that. They'd rather buy it cheap and sell it back to you expensive, if you know what I mean. So you have to convert to a Ruraflex power system, which is 200 kVA and up and all that. But that one's got like a little cell phone signal there that sends your usage straight through to their billing department. Then your rate then goes to what they call Ruraflex. And there are 3 different rates. You've got a nighttime rate, a daytime rate, and a morning and evening rate. And they're all very, very different. So I've got a thing I can't show you now, but so in the winter months, the high peak is like R4.70 a kilowatt hour. And your nighttime rate is about 70 cents, 60, 70 cents a kilowatt hour. So now when you start feeding back into the grid, they only give you credits for the time that you fed into the grid. So if you want to use your pump at night, you know, irrigation doesn't matter, it's day or night, and you want to pump at night, they'll only give you credits for your daytime use, because that's the daytime when you're feeding into the grid. And they'll only give you credits in the high peak time if you fed in at that time. So the whole billing process is extremely, extremely expensive. And no one can actually audit them to see how much you've actually fed back in. Only they can do it. So it's difficult for us to go and work out how much you fed back. And then the other thing that they do is that their financial year ends the end of March every year. So if you've got credits there at the end of March, you lose it, it's gone.
They don't pay cash.
They're not prepared. And they're not prepared to convert the cash of the daytime feed to running at night. You know, because the center pivot running at night is far more efficient than daytime because you've got less evapotranspiration and everything like that as well. So if Eskom can sort that out, where they give you, say, a monetary reward for what you're feeding back and not a time.
Yeah. Just in terms of, without taking the feeding back into the grid into consideration, just in terms of your production, your efficiencies, your farming businesses' profitability, have you seen a marked difference given what the investment is? Because we know cost is incredibly prohibitive.
So the investment in the solar panels is quite significant. And I think the sums that we did, we paid back over 4 or 5 years.
That's good.
But the problem is that grid-tied system does not work through load shedding. Soon as you get your grid-tied system to have a battery backup, then you're investing millions in there, you know, to be able to run a whole pack shed on batteries. So the 2 hours or 4 hours of load shedding, we've got to have a backup generator that can pull everything. And that is where the big expenses come, because your diesel usage on a backup generator is probably 6 times more than the rate of Eskom.
And we've all seen what the diesel price did in the last
Oh,
few
it's even
seconds.
getting worse now, yeah.
Yeah, big impact. Candace, the progress with balancing the energy mix, you know, achieving energy security, where are we in terms of progress made over the last year or two, given the challenges and the escalation of load shedding, and this specifically with an eye on the national renewable energy targets? Because the national targets, you know, to a farmer, that might seem abstract, but we've got to look at the bigger picture and the overall arc.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of components to that. First of all, I think from an export-orientated fresh produce perspective, you're probably looking at not only domestic targets, but also where we're heading to in terms of 2030 targets in Europe, for example. So we need to figure out ways of reducing our carbon footprint on this side in order to still be able to ship in future. So I think that's the one component. Locally, in my mind, it's much more difficult for 7,000, well, in the Western Cape, 7,000 or so producers to individually make a plan at farm level. I mean, City of Cape Town, you guys are using I think about 80% of the total energy in the Western Cape. So in my mind, if we can, it's much easier to have one big solution that will assist them, and then there's enough energy for everybody else to use. But to get that sorted is also no easy task. I do just want to mention that my hometown, Laingsburg, we only use 8 gigawatt hours in a year, and you use 11,000. So there's no reason why Laingsburg should get load shedding. We're not the culprit.
Got to get your message in there.
Yes. Yeah, all jokes aside, I think I just looked at the data this morning in terms of what we've imported over the last couple of years in terms of batteries and solar and all those kind of things. And it's crazy the number of units that it has escalated with. Just for the first half of this year, we've imported 4 times the value of batteries than last year, the same period. So people are making investments, and I think it comes back to when we look at what the Reserve Bank has calculated in terms of what the impact on the economy should be, and what we don't see, it means that there is a lot of plans being made, and I think, for example, if you can irrigate during nighttime, that's great. But some guys, like if you are a blueberry producer, you can't say, okay, blueberry, just hang on, I'll give you water tonight. It doesn't work like that. So I think there's a lot of work being done for producers to try and manage their what they need, but we're still a long way off from really securing the energy we need to continue production as is.
I think in all of the discussions, the elephant in the room is probably Eskom itself, because they have to be a part of the solution. We can't sidestep them. Things have to start working. We know maintenance has been neglected for so long. We know there is massive investment, and there is a push to try and fix things. But we need the infrastructure to ultimately get the energy, whether it's renewable or not, to the users. What are your engagements at a provincial or city level in terms of trying to manage that dichotomy between national and provincial?
We engage with Eskom on a monthly basis at a senior level, at a provincial level, and until recently I had been engaging regularly at a national level as well, because we're also trying to take over some of the Eskom supply areas inside the city. My impression is that of an organization that is basically broken. I have got, I'm afraid, zero confidence in Eskom's ability to fix load shedding in South Africa. That's why we have to rush as fast as possible to do it ourselves. We will still need Eskom for many years to come to provide a certain baseload level of power. But I think we will increasingly have to rely on ourselves in the Western Cape and in Cape Town to provide a huge amount of additional electricity on top of that. We're trying to, the goal that we are racing towards is to try and replace 20% of our energy needs from our own sources. But we're not going to stop there. Once we get to 20%, we will keep going, because I think that Eskom's supply will become less and less reliable, not more reliable. Gary produces 100 kilowatts at his farm. The incredible thing, no matter what it cost you, Gary, it was well worth it, because Kusile cost 233 billion, and it's producing less than Gary's 100 kilowatts. So whatever it costs, it's frankly worth it for the sustainability of your business.
Energy generation aside, transmission infrastructure, is that as big a pitfall as everyone seems to think it is? Because without that, you can produce all the energy you want, but where's it going to go?
Yeah.
So I spoke to some of these technical guys about the distribution network and that. And the one figure that I got out of them was they don't allow renewable energy or solar panels or wind farms, because in the Eastern Cape there are lots of wind farms there as well, can't go over 30% of the line's transmission capacity. And it's got to do with the technical thing. I'm not a boffin, but anyway, they say that's the limit. So I'd like to question that limit. Sometimes I think with synchronization properly, you might be able to do a lot more than that. The other thing is, it was explained to me, which I don't quite understand all that well, but they say that if you've got a line of electricity going this way, and you feeding into the grid, only people further down the line can use that electricity. It can't go backwards to sort of like the power station where it comes from. And so that's a technical thing. I'm sure if you get a lot of people to go and investigate that, how you can solve some of those problems so that you don't have to build new transmission lines all the time.
Just in terms of...
If I could just,
Yes,
just quickly
absolutely.
come in there. Just to answer your direct question, yes, it is a major stumbling block. There are large parts of the country, large parts of the Western Cape, where there is no additional grid capacity available. So you can squeeze in a little bit of domestic and industrial solar if it doesn't get much bigger than the kind of system that some farmers have. But any utility scale stuff can't be invested, can't be built.
Yeah.
And that is a major hurdle. So on top of all the work we have to do to actually generate the power, you've got to do infrastructure upgrades to allow it to be fed into the grid.
Because there's now a cap on wind farms. We can't do more wind farms because we don't have more transmission capacity to...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the saddest part is the part of the country that has the sunniest skies in the world, we're told, in the Northern Cape. There's no grid capacity whatsoever. There's, it's absolutely at capacity. So if Eskom had been investing in grid capacity over the last decade, we could now onboard a lot more of these solar farms. At the moment, we can't.
Looking with the predictions about what the wind is going to do here at Nampo Cape tomorrow, I'm sure if we had some kind of generating capacity here, we'd be able to power the whole Nampo. I was going to ask you, Gary, about your experience of infrastructure being in the Eastern Cape. I mean, we know the Eastern Cape is probably one of the most forgotten provinces in terms of investment in infrastructure. And just as a Gautenger coming to the Western Cape, I don't think people in the Western Cape really understand that coming here, you can actually feel that sort of golden glow of things actually working a lot better. I think people here might take it for granted. But what's the situation like with infrastructure maintenance on an energy level in the Eastern Cape?
Are you talking specifically about Eskom?
Well,
or are you talking about roads and everything else?
It all forms part of a package.
Yeah, so the Eskom infrastructure in the Transkei was expanded quite significantly by the government because the electrification promise in the Transkei was big, and it has happened. So that rural electrification has happened on a very, very large scale. So the Eskom infrastructure there, I think, is adequate. When it comes to roads and other things, I don't want to go down that road now because it's a long, sad story.
It's a bumpy one.
It's a very bumpy road.
Very bumpy.
There's lots of holes in it too.
Okay. I want to come back to you, Mayor. There's been considerable investment, especially in the Western Cape, but we do need more. In terms of storage of energy, smart technologies, what are the current opportunities? And not just for producers in the broader context, because I think a lot of producers are also broader businessmen who see these other opportunities.
The obvious opportunities are in storage. As Gary rightly says, if you want to break the back of load shedding, you have to be able to store power. There's no other way to it. Eskom doesn't care that you generate your own power, as we've seen in that Free State town. I forget the name of it. Frankfurt. Thank you very much. And so they don't care that you generate your own power and lower the national demand. That doesn't contribute to your load shedding sums at all. They're still going to nail you with 2 stages if we're on stage 2. So you have to be able to store power that you bring onto grid at the moment that load shedding happens. And that is extremely expensive. The price is coming down dramatically, but the price of batteries is still very expensive. And so I think it's worth making that investment now, just like it was worth buying an early version of the computer because you know it's important to get into the technology, and in 4 or 5 years' time, it's going to be half the price anyway. We know that the price is collapsing, but it's important for us to learn how to integrate that technology into our grid now, how to use it as a load shedding mitigation technology now. So we are doing that, but it does mean that you have to have a difficult conversation with the public about cost, because it does come at a cost to the local town and to our city. That Eskom is not, obviously they're not interested in picking it up. That's your cost. And then there's lots of other interesting opportunities outside of the solar and wind space. They are still all very nascent. Things like wave technology, wave strength generation technology is one that I'm very interested in personally. There's a little tiny pilot project in Hermanus. I'd love to know how that pilot is actually going, because that has obvious applications for the Western Cape with our massive coastline. So that's just one. There's rubbish to energy, waste to energy. That's obviously a huge opportunity for us because we generate hundreds of tons of waste a day in a city the size of Cape Town. So there's lots of those other opportunities. None of them at the moment are anywhere near as cheap as solar power, and that's the big thing. Solar power prices are just so affordable and competitive at the moment that it's tough to compete with that, and that's going to be the challenge over the coming years.
Candace, in terms of biofuels, all these other, energy solutions, renewable solutions that are, we know there's a hell of a lot of research going into them, but in terms of practical implementation, where they're at a level where farmers can actually see the returns, what is the landscape looking like locally?
I think in terms of something like biogas, there's potential, but it comes also with real big challenges in terms of infrastructure, moving that gas, finding pipelines which you can connect to. We're busy now with a project where we're trying to understand where that opportunities are and what's feasible, because you compete with food production at the end of the day. So it's a careful balance, especially on the biogas side. But I think we're getting closer to real implementable solutions in the agricultural space on alternatives beyond solar and wind. I think wind, for example, it would be great if we can utilize something like that on an individual farm level. I don't think it's really...
I'll come in on that.
Cool, because I would love to know more. I think one of the challenges that we see with these implementations is, as Gary said, is how do you connect it on your farm? Because if you don't, for example, if you have a pack house and you put, and then you have a manual switch, so then every time you stop, you switch, your line runs clear, you start afresh. So so we're not only looking at then the energy cost, we're also looking at downtime cost. So there's a lot of unintended costs that at the end of the day adds up, which makes it, the opportunity cost component almost makes it worth the investment. But then for the investment, we need the banks and everybody else to cooperate, because at current interest rates, it's not current interest rates versus current profitability rates at farm level. It's really a tough chicken egg kind of situation to get going on alternatives.
And of course, then you've got this cold chain impact where, if you're exporting, you've got to explain that to someone.
Yes.
And they're not always, very sympathetic to our struggles here in South Africa. Gary, you're going to chime in on the wind issue.
About the biogas thing. So with my potato pack shed, all the waste potatoes, we dump them. So I did a bit of investigation if I can do a biogas digester. So the product of a biogas digester, which can use municipal waste, lots and lots of opportunities there, is that the product is methane. Okay? So methane, to store the methane is the problem, because to compress it into like a liquid form and cart it around, can run motor cars, whatever, is very good. But to compress it is so expensive because it needs such a lot of compression. It's like 20 atmospheres or something. Whereas propane, which is your cooking gas or whatever, is a lot cheaper to compress. It doesn't need fancy cylinders and that. And the other problem is that propane, to boil a kettle of water, you use 2.5 times the amount of methane to propane to boil the same kettle of water. So if you use the methane to use gas burners and gas lighting or whatever, just remember you have to recalibrate all those stoves and things to take the higher volume of gas necessary. So when we get the technology right and how to store the stuff and compress it, then I think it'll be a winner.
We saw in Bree Street the wrong way to store it.
No.
Let's not get into Joburg's woes. No. I want to come back to you quickly, Candace, and talk about, just come back to that dichotomy between national goals and national strategy and what we're seeing as a provincial, strategic approach here in the Western Cape. Where are we with broad policy formulation? Because there seems to be so many gaps in mapping the way forward that the guys on the ground who are trying to make those solutions, not just individually, but collaboratively amongst producers and in a town, are struggling to overcome the hurdles. As Gary described earlier, that the processes are so onerous just for producers to tap into the system.
Yeah, I think, our National Electricity Committee, or NEC, I think
NECOM.
it's NEC.
NECOM, yeah.
My understanding is that there's not a lot happening on that side. And so the progress that we see in the Western Cape are primarily driven by our Premier and our Department of Agriculture. So it's not whatever is being done here is actually they used as an example, and they just try to keep up on whatever the Western Cape is doing. So I think in broad strokes, Western Cape is the example for everybody else to follow, but we still need the input from national in order for us to progress at the rate that we envision for ourselves.
And of course, in this picture, unfortunately, politics plays such a big role, because now we're sitting with a DA-led government in the Western Cape, and I'm sure the ANC national government is quite hesitant to say, what great work you're doing in the Western Cape, let's do what you're doing. So that plays a big role in terms of the scalability and the sharing of the solutions. What's been your experience in talking to other provincial governments in terms of them going, well, hang on, let's reach out, can we learn from you, what can we transfer to other areas, so that South Africans and farmers all across the country can benefit from the kind of solutions that are being implemented here?
Despite the politics, we've had contact from most of the, if I just think quickly, I think all of the other major metros in the country to ask what we're doing, to come and see. They've sent delegations, they've sent their heads of electricity. So I think that there is a real mindset shift in South African municipalities, those that have any kind of capacity to do so, that this is not going to get sorted out by NECOM. It's not going to get sorted out by Eskom. It's going to be sorted out at a local and provincial level. Remember that municipalities own grids of their own in South Africa. So the work that the Western Cape municipalities are doing can have a real impact because they've got their own grid capacity. Of course, they are all linked by Eskom capacity, and that is part of the infrastructure challenge. And that's part of the work the Premier is trying to do, about talking about creating this provincial power purchasing pool that I think could make a real difference if you can get excess capacity in Drakensberg or Hermanus, for example, and wheel that through to Knysna or Laingsburg, so that you can get, then you can really have impact.
Yeah.
But I think that certainly from my experience, Johannesburg, Durban, Port Elizabeth have all come to see us. They're all keen to do exactly what we're doing and have started it. It just unfortunately takes a long time in South Africa to get these projects actually off the ground and connected. And so if they're only starting now, it means that they are 2 years behind the curve, at least.
Yeah, the Titanic turns very closely when there's icebergs dotted all around you. I want to get to part about agriculture, and I come from a background that's only recently veered or steered me into agriculture, and the things that astound and overwhelm me and give me such incredible hope for South Africa is the way that people in the agriculture space, whether that's organizations, agribusinesses, producers themselves, input suppliers, everyone just sort of comes to the party, and there's so many collaborative efforts. Yes, in certain instances, people still do work in silos, but I think there's a real push, concerted push at the moment to try and formulate this collaborative effort. Gary, talk to us about the efforts, collaboratives, cooperatives of farmers working together, because we know that a farmer trying to provide an energy solution just for his business, the odds are stacked against him, but when you pool resources together, it opens the doors.
So if you go and you have a look at a typical farmer, say in the Northern Cape or something, where he's totally reliant on irrigated water. So if you look at the billing method of Eskom on their RuReflex system with a very high demand in the mornings and the evenings, and that's when everyone's doing their cooking and heating or whatever just before they go to work and when they come back. Farmers don't need so much electricity in those two gaps. So for them to irrigate at night and work their pack sheds or whatever, I'm just referring to myself, at night. And I've got cooler rooms as well. To switch off those cooler rooms for those times is easy. It's not an issue. But allow me to operate in the other low-risk times. So if you have that collaboration with Eskom, give us load shedding in those high times, in the mornings and the evenings. We'll live around it and we'll adapt very easily. You know, so, but if you're going to load shed me in those times, I can't feed back into the grid then either, because I'm load shedded. So if you have those kind of an agreements, and I'm sure all the people with big cold chains and all that, we'll get through those 2-3 hours in the mornings and the evenings. So that kind of cooperation could be mutually beneficial, you know, because...
That's cooperation reliant on Eskom, though. So cooperation between farmers, aside of waiting for Eskom to come to the party, because I think we could hold our breaths and perhaps turn blue and all kinds of shades of other colors as well before that happens. Have you seen examples in your area of farmers buying solar panels or technologies, investing in a kind of system that can supply multiple properties, and are there practical ways of...
No, it hasn't happened in our area. I don't know if it's happened here in the Western Cape yet. But the conditions aren't conducive to that to happen at the moment. I think the thing that is very, very conducive, every farmer's got their own farm. And on that farm, there's some things that are special. You know, you've got a mountain that's got a lot of wind on the top of it, or some guy's got a canal of water running through it, and they go and they put in a hydro scheme. Or so ingenuity from each individual for his specific space should be encouraged, because each farm is different to the other one. And what is going to be good for one farm is not going to be good for all, if you know what I mean. But give the guy the incentive to be ingenious about generating power and that. You'll be amazed at how much you'll get out of each individual farmer. Because farmers are known to be a boer maak 'n plan. Give them the incentive to make a plan, you'll be amazed.
I want to come to you, May, if I can, to talk about those cooperative projects. Because that's been touted as a possible solution. And we're not just talking to the farmers who have the capacity to put in their own alternative energy solutions. We're talking about many farmers who are trying to build their enterprises who don't have the capex to do that. That leaves them without any kind of a solution, but there have to be ways in which farmers can work together. Have you seen those kind of projects?
Unfortunately, Eskom doesn't allow wheeling, to the best of my knowledge. Is that right, Doctor? So far as I know, Eskom doesn't yet allow wheeling in South Africa. So that's to the best of my knowledge, which means that it's not technically possible for a farmer to sell to his neighbor unless you run an extension cord. Of course, we need a wheeling framework urgently from Eskom, and that would allow exactly that kind of neighborly cooperation, which would make a big difference. If there's a farmer who has unutilized land that's well located for solar panels, they could supply all farms around them.
What are the constraints? Why isn't it happening?
There's no, it's not allowed legally by if you're in an Eskom area, it's not allowed.
But is that just a case of legally, well, it's a law that comes from an era when it wasn't necessary and it's easy to change that, or is it an infrastructure issue?
I think it's both.
Both.
I think my understanding is, as you said, you can only sell, I mean, the telephone line goes this way, doesn't
Down.
the call is going. So I think that is probably one of the biggest issues. I forgot the name of what they call that broodkraal Eskom line, where they didn't have load shedding they were trialing during the table grape season.
Okay.
Where they were looking at, okay, so everybody has to reduce by 20%. Well, the line has to be the capacity, well, say they use 100 megawatts, then they had to go at 800. So between the producers themselves, they had to manage their load. So if I'm going to start something, I need to make sure that you are off so that the whole line doesn't go over the capacity that they've agreed with Eskom.
Yeah.
So in that sense, in my mind, the potential, if they could get that right for a season, and I've spoken to some of the people who were involved in that project, and it seems like, okay, but this guy can't physically, cut by 20%. He can either cut by 40 or he's at full because his pump is either on or off. He can't just do 20% reduction, so they need to manage that. So if we can theoretically, get it at where that Eskom power fed into that line, I mean, it's potentially an option to have something of a alternative energy source for that line. So all of those guys then, at the end of the day, contribute to getting their own power station of some sorts, which cuts them off the national grid, and they use that line. But then I think one of the challenges is that line is property of Eskom. So then you have to buy the line, or you're going to have a line running adjacent to a line just because you can't get that line transferred. So
Yeah. Keep coming back to the elephant in the room. I want to come to you, May, and talk quickly about PPPs.
Yes.
So making a plan, part of that is just picking up the slack, doing things that national government either can't or won't do, and that's great. Gary and I were having a very interesting conversation before the session began, and I said, well, that's great because we need to get things done, but to a certain extent, are these private-public partnerships also not just enabling national government to get tax revenue without having to do what they're mandated to do because everyone else is doing it already?
Yes.
And how do we make PPPs work in the energy space while still putting enough pressure on Eskom and on national resources to make sure that in 5 years' time, we're not still sitting with stage 6 or 7 load shedding? And I know it's a very broad theoretical question, but I do like those.
No, that's a good question. Firstly, I don't think that we'll have stage 5 or 6 in 5 years' time, but not because of Eskom or NECOM. I think it will be because of major power users and major municipalities doing their own thing in enough scale around the country such that you reduce the national grid demand by 7,000 or 8,000 megawatts,
Okay.
8 gigawatts. So I do think that we will get over load shedding. I'm confident of that, but despite Eskom, not because of Eskom. Then, on PPPs, I think actually you're right. And there's lots of other examples of that in South Africa where you pay a double taxation effectively because you're paying for the service that isn't being delivered.
Medical
and
aid,
then you're having
education, fire services,
exactly.
all of these.
And then you're having to go and find that service elsewhere or make another plan. That's unfortunately a feature of our country at the moment with bad leadership. But it's still not going to hold us back. I'm more concerned with how do we protect our residents from and our businesses and our farmers from exposure to that state failure, and try and work on changing leadership as well. That's my primary obsession. So I'm a big believer in PPPs. I think it can be done much more efficiently, with much better outcomes for the public. And one day when we can change leadership, hopefully sometime soon, then we can start to fix the other side of the equation as well.
Daar was jou
Ja,
Lionsburg
absoluut,
ene.
absoluut. Jy weet ons moet.
Does that come at the cost of economic growth?
No,
Is the private sector strong enough to do both?
absolutely.
Okay.
It technically contributes to growth.
Yes.
Okay.
Because there's investment and there's employment and so it does generate an economy of its own.
Okay. I want to leave us enough time for questions from the audience. I do. There's one thing one or two things. I've got lots of notes here, lots of exciting things. Candace, if you could quickly just tell us about subsidies, because we know the Land Bank has made subsidies available to farmers for energy solutions, but we don't know whether that's accessible to every farmer. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the average farmer in South Africa can get access to subsidies?
I'm not sure whether that fund has been running. Maybe
I think it's been announced in the last week that
Is it
there's a
up and
certain
running?
allocation, 2.1 billion. I think I'm not sure. I might be speaking under correction.
And
Maybe
it's
perhaps
upload-
you can give us some input there, Minister Ivan Meyer.
Yeah, the national minister has recently announced a 1.2 billion rand agriculture energy fund, and farmers can now, because the criteria has now been set only in the last 2 weeks, so it's still early days. But my worries is also, does the government have the capacity to implement anything successfully? Or is this another election ploy? That's my worries, that's my concern.
I'm glad I didn't have to raise that. And it came from the floor. I would look like a news anchor constantly being the devil's advocate.
Yeah. So I mean that's there and it's accessible. How quick will that process run? How strict will they be with implementing according to the criteria? When approved, how long will it take? And my concern at this point is we're in September, and if we get to the same levels of additional load shedding towards the end of the year that we saw last year, October, November, December was, I think December we had more load shedding than the whole of the year. It was a crazy end of the year, and it's got to do with a lot of the maintenance being done in the summer months because households use a lot of energy in the winter months. And for us, from a irrigation perspective, cold storage,
El Nino.
pack houses, everything that runs in the summer months, it's a huge concern. And I think, yes, so there is stuff being done. There is access, there is subsidies or soft loans, but it's not enough, it's not quick enough to really support the agricultural industry as it should be supported at this point.
I'd make a statement that if Eskom encouraged wheeling agreements, feedback strategies, then the progress will be months. It will be a significant difference.
Agreed.
Because at the moment, you can't wheel to another person because that other person hasn't got the right meters and things. It's technically allowed, but it's impossible to do because of the rules of the game. So I reckon if Eskom changes the rules of the game, very quickly you will fill such huge gaps. It's frightening.
We are under a certain measure of time pressure here. And I think a lot of farmers are looking at the next 3 years with a lot of trepidation, wondering what the weather patterns are going to do to production, to the demand for extra irrigation if we don't have rainfall in obviously the summer rainfall areas, the kind of cold room pressures it's going to do. But we don't seem to have, time doesn't seem to be on our side.
It's not on our side, and I think it affects the smaller producer more than it affects the bigger guy. I mean, there's a lot of issues that we have that is disproportionately affecting the smaller producer, and one of them is, I mean, just if you look at any criteria to apply for some sort of aid. The list is extremely long, and the producer is probably owner-operator. He's his own financial guy with a stack of papers, and he's trying to get access, but he is unable to do so in the time period that he has to to keep his business afloat.
We know a lot of things play into the bigger picture as well. Alternative energies, national development goals, reduction of carbon footprint, all of that, climate change, job creation is very important. We don't have time to get through it all, unfortunately. Luckily, these conversations are ongoing, on the farm level, at industry organizations, among agribusinesses. I think everyone is very focused on the issue of energy. I want to use the opportunity to get some questions from the audience for our panelists. Please don't ask me anything. I know nothing. But you're more than welcome to let us know. We've got a question from the back there. We're going to get a microphone to you. No, don't worry. The microphone will be handed to you over the back railing. There we go.
Good morning to the Minister, the Mayor, and the attendees. So I'm an electrical engineer of 35 years, no longer. I'm in real estate now. But we formed a energy subcommittee in Napier, which you know is 13 kilometers down the road. In the context of CAM and obviously the larger Western Cape province, does US aid play a role in any of this alternative energy infrastructure that we are talking about? We hear this constant message back from local council, US aid this, US aid that. So I think that's a very open question. Are they a component of where we're going with infrastructure and funding?
And of course, China, BRICS, all of that plays into the mix. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. Who would
Sorry,
like to
May,
take
I'm
that?
putting you on the spot there.
No, I'm not. We're not doing work with USAID. I'm not sure if it's something that your local council is doing.
Okay.
Maybe the minister is aware of some other projects with USAID. Let me just say more broadly on funding. Financing energy projects is not a problem. That is not the issue. There is more than enough global finance for renewable energy projects. You will drown in money, but the money, there's no such thing as free money. I'm always slightly tickled when I see these big international conferences, BRICS this and Climate 40, what's it, C40 and COP27, all these things offering free money. There's no such thing. It's always terms and conditions apply. You must use French companies. You must use Spanish companies. It's a loan, not a grant. The rates are quite.
It's not free money.
It's not.
Yeah.
It never is.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any. If you've got USAID free money, please call me afterwards.
Just coming back to the statement you made about the municipality that's going to be earmarked, what is the timeline associated with that? When do you envisage that happening?
Alan, the Premier has set a timeline for that. You interviewed him yesterday on this.
No, I just sort of heard part of the conversation. So unfortunately, Premier Alan Winde is not here to give you the right answer, and I don't want to hazard a guess.
But his minister is here. His minister, I think, can answer, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually disappointing not to see somebody from local council here, because this is obviously a collective issue. But I could talk for hours. It's a pity this is not for 4 hours. There are many facets to this, so
we'll have you on the panel next time.
I'd love to be there.
I just think that perhaps Minister Meyer could shed some light on some of those.
We're going to get the microphone from the back there.
I'm not aware of any US aid funding for any such projects, but I am aware of a $8.5 billion US dollar for the just energy transition, which include the United States and many countries in the European Union. Yeah. So that money is available for the just energy transition. But again, it's not free money, comes with conditions, and we are working with the European Union. We in fact recently had the EU ambassador, Dr. Sandra Kramer. We invited her also to our cabinet to engage with her on these particular matters. There's also great significant work that is being done through the hydrogen power. And so for us, this is very, very significant and important. What we have done in the Western Cape, we have accepted, and I like our farmer Gary's attitude, I call it RI, resilience and innovation. That's the language that he spoke. We have accepted a long time ago that Eskom is not going to solve this problem. So I'm on the same line as our mayor. So you have 3 times now asked about this dichotomy and the policy vacuum. So what we have done here in the Western Cape, because we see institutional vacuums, so we have developed now, the Premier appointed an energy advisor, he appointed an energy council. I'm a member of that energy council as well as Dr. Sebo Petse, my head of the department. We are looking at the energy council at the interest of agriculture. That's my primary business and my primary concern in the energy council. So what we have done, because of this dichotomy that you refer to and the policy gaps, we have now started a process to develop an IRP, Integrated Resource Plan. That plan will be the policy architecture as to how we will solve the energy problem in the Western Cape. And we will become the first province in South Africa that will beat load shedding. The city of Cape Town will become the first metropolitan city in South Africa to beat load shedding with more than 4 million people. So this is what we are currently doing. Get the policy architecture right. Get the competent people that understand this energy architecture. That's why the previous general manager of Eskom in the Western Cape, Mr. Alwie Lester, he is now the advisor for the Premier. He knows the architecture and the landscape, so we have appointed him in that particular context. So we are also now, we've done 2 things. When we see sewage water running down the streets in other towns, it's not going to happen in the Western Cape. We have allocated 88.1 million rand to all the municipalities in the Western Cape to make sure that there's capacity to pump water and sewage to the right places so it does not flow in the street. So that's the first thing we did. The second thing, we said to the municipalities, we want 5 towns free from load shedding. Bring us proposals, and we are now ready with 2 towns here in the Western Cape who will be free from load shedding. Not 2 municipalities, but 2 towns in 2 separate municipalities. Have the capacity, but they must feed, as the mayor said, into the municipal grid, not into the Eskom grid, so that we have control and capacity. We have no faith in the implementation capacity of this government. In fact, it's only a new government that will be coming next year that can fix this problem permanently.
After the session, I think we might get the names of those 2 towns from you, Minister, and we can maybe all semigrate down here. We are pretty much at the conclusion of our session. I do want to give each... Do we have another question there? Yes, sorry. Let's give an opportunity for another question, and I'll get closing comments from our speakers.
Hi, Jordan. Firstly, thanks for the great work that you're doing. I think for a lot of young people, specifically in the Western Cape, like I run a technology company, and Cape Town is very well known for the tech space. Everyone's very impressed with your approach, and you bring a lot of hope and good things to that area. So thank you for your great work.
Thank you.
My question is around, maybe very controversial, but at some juncture, national government is for sure disincentivized to assist and must spoliate, because if you get it right, it sends a huge message to the rest of the country what governance can do, and really things can topple. You don't have to mention what the contingency plan is, but is there a contingency plan where your plans won't get spoliated? That's question 1. And question 2, further to not put you on the spot, do you have any sense of a timeline or a soft timeline of when you can have, because once you have one proof of concept, we have Cape Town, no more load shedding, that will shatter across the whole country. It will be a fundamental change, because people don't care if you can give them electricity. It's huge.
Yes. 2 great questions. So firstly, the easiest one on timeline, we've set a very clear timeline for the next 2 years for those 700 megawatts of projects. That gets us to 700 megawatts, I'm afraid, only gets us to stage 4 protection. Up until this year, 97% of load shedding in South Africa was stage 4 or less. So we kind of felt that was that was basically free of load shedding. This year, unfortunately, we've had a lot of stage 6. But we'll keep buying. Once we get to stage 4, we'll just keep buying. Stage 4 protection, rather. Then the first question is the most important. In the electricity space, we do not need anyone's permission. When we started buying this power, it's amazing how quickly the law and the regulatory environment has changed in South Africa. In February of last year, it's not long ago, 18 months ago, it was still illegal for us to buy power from the market. It was the case that only Eskom may buy power from IPPs in South Africa. We still had this ridiculous notion that we must go and ask the Minister of Energy permission to stop load shedding in our town or our city. And we said we are just simply not going to do that. Stop us if you would like, but we're going. And we went to market last year, February, on the 700 megawatts. No one stopped us. And in fact, what happened is last year, June, all of those regulations fell. We now need no permission. We can buy as much power as we want. Essentially, overnight, the electricity supply market in South Africa was democratized overnight. A major moment for the country. Unfortunately, that's not the case in some other respects. So, for example, we're very keen to take over the management of passenger rail in Cape Town, and I'm sure farmers would like us to take over freight rail as well. But that's, you know, we do not have the capacity we don't have the space to build a new train line. You have to take over the one that is already there, which is currently in the ownership of the national state via PRASA, the Passenger Rail Authority of South Africa. The reason I'm still extremely confident is because, as Ivan says, I have got precisely zero confidence that it can be run properly by its current management and owners at the national state. So eventually you just come smacking into reality, like has happened at SAA, like has happened at the Post Office, like has happened at Eskom, and like will happen at Transnet and PRASA as well. If you go and read the PRASA financial statements, they just released their first annual report in 5 years, by the way, and they, you know, it's basically technically bankrupt if they don't get massive subsidies every year and bailouts. They can't function. Now, at the moment, they're being subsidized by farmers, because our ports in South Africa are extremely profitable for Transnet. Our ports run at a massive profit. Transnet takes the profits from our ports and cross-subsidizes into PRASA and Metro Rail. The ports are profitable despite them being among the most inefficient ports in the world. So at the moment, those subsidies have worked. But actually, PRASA's financial situation is getting so bad that they're going to need actual state bailouts, not from the harbors, but from the state. So I'm confident that eventually you have to come to terms with reality. You can't run this anymore. It is bankrupt. It's not going anywhere. You have to give it away to someone who wants to run it and who can run it. And we will be there open arms.
Good luck.
Right. Thank you so much for the questions from the audience. I'd like to take a couple of minutes just from each of you to get a question, a suggestion, some advice, a key focal point to drive the discussion forward, because ultimately the point of Nation in Conversation is also to spark further debates down the line amongst the people who are here in the audience, those watching online, and those who will see these discussions online at a later stage. Gary, I'd like to start with you. What's your key message?
So I would like to find someone to take up the reins to go and create a platform where we can go and do meaningful change with Eskom and the way that they treat the farmers, the feeding back system, the wheeling agreements, that to make life easier for farmers to be able to put back into the grid. So I don't know if it should be Agri-EC or what, but we need a significant platform where those negotiations can happen on a realistic basis.
And I know so many of the leaders in agricultural organizations in South Africa are participating actively in those forums, driving for change, driving for the kind of things, the kind of solutions that our farmers need on the ground. So that should continue.
I just don't know if Eskom and the government, because the government controls Eskom, have got this mindset change where they don't have to control everything. They must allow things to happen.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, their whole policy, everything that they do, is so that they have to control the price of the Eskom, the price of the generation, the wheeling, the everything. So if they just allow it to happen, so that they can be the conduit for electricity to go through. So we need someone to be able to negotiate with the relevant people in government to allow that to happen.
I think politics of the stomach needs to let loose its grip slightly on our South African institutions for that to happen. But hopefully we will see that happening over
It's a
time.
mindset change.
Yeah. Candace.
I think for us, it's we've done this project now with the Western Cape Department of Agriculture on the impact of load shedding, and I think we came to quite a number of tangibles that they can operate from, that they can use in their strategies. And I think one of the things that just maybe is just a case in point in terms of Eskom's ability to move quick. So we're in the final stages. The final report was delivered end of May, and we're in the final stages now of getting the data from Eskom for that project. So timelines are not aligning, but I mean, what we're trying to do is to, once we get that information as to what the different producers, you know, what's their usage, what are they operating, you know, we can potentially further aid the plans that needs to be made, because once you understand what the demand on a certain line is, there's more tangibles, there's better communication between different departments, between Western Cape Department Agriculture, City of Cape Town. Listen, what's your demand peaks? What's the demand peaks on the producer side, so that we can lower the load shedding situation for the whole of the Western Cape, because we speak to each other and we have the data available, and then to expand that to the rest of the country. If we can understand the demands of and the impacts of load shedding across the country on production level, we could potentially give much better data to support the guys running in the industry bodies with tangible information to get to an improved state.
Thank you. Mayor.
I would just say that if you are hesitating about making an investment for alternative, your own power arrangements, I would say don't hesitate, do it. The load shedding is not going to get better in the short term. It is going to take time, and it's only going to get better because of people in our country, farmers, miners, businesses making these kinds of investments. So go for it. It will pay more than dividends in time. And secondly, I think you know, in 10 years' time, Eskom will be just one of many major power suppliers in South Africa, and it may not even be the biggest anymore. The power market in this country is changing dramatically, and I think the more that we as a province and towns and cities in our province can be self-reliant, the better off we will be for that uncertain future.
Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for your willing ears. Thank you for Senves for putting this discussion on the table. And we hope you'll join us again. We've got another session at 2 o'clock. We're looking at the sheep farming industry. And we hope you enjoy Nampo Cape. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.